They say a mother's love is the purest force in the universe, an instinctive primal drive that forces a woman to rush into a fire for her child. We've grown accustomed to believing that a mother's arms are the safest place on earth. But what happens when those same arms, while gently stroking a child's head, are simultaneously administering poison and doing it under the glare of a camera lens, all for the sake of a few hundred admiring comments? In the age of social media, we've learned to put our lives on display. We crave recognition, sympathy, validation. But for Lacey Spears, ordinary attention wasn't enough. She needed something more. She needed the status of a grand martyr, a saintly mother whose path was an endless struggle against an invisible enemy devouring her angel. January 2014, New York, Westchester Medical Center. It's quiet in room 516. The only sounds are the rhythmic beep of monitors and the soft tapping of fingers on a smartphone screen. Lacey Spears is writing another post for her blog, Garnett's Journey. The photo shows her 5-year-old son, Garnett, a boy with a mop of golden hair and huge, trusting eyes. The caption reads, "My brave warrior is in trouble again. Pray for us." In that moment, thousands of people around the world are refreshing their feeds, leaving hearts and words of support. They don't know that just minutes before, Lacey had taken her son to the bathroom, far from the cameras and the eyes of the nurses, and did something that turned his blood into a lethal brine. This isn't just a story about a murder. It is a chronicle of a monstrous performance where we were the audience, and the price of the ticket was the life of a 5-year-old boy who, until his very last breath, believed his mother was saving him. Welcome to a world where compassion becomes currency, and motherhood, a deadly weapon. Your likes and comments help promote our videos, and please subscribe to Crime Queen if you appreciate high-quality true crime videos. Thank you. Those who knew her in her youth remember Lacey was always different. She didn't just tell stories, she created alternative realities. She would claim to be terminally ill or invent a tragedy just to be the topic of conversation in the school hallway. It was a hunger, an almost physical need to be watched, to be pitied, to be admired. In 2008, when Lacey was 20, she became pregnant. For many, it was a surprise, but Lacey instantly turned her pregnancy into a dramatic saga. She announced that the father was Blake, a brave police officer, her great love, who had tragically died in a car accident. She described him as a hero, mourning him on social media, gathering the first crumbs of the very sympathy that would soon become her primary drug. Was any of it true? Not a word. Blake was alive. He wasn't a police officer. He was an ordinary guy she had a brief fling with. He didn't even know Lacey was pregnant. She simply erased the real man and replaced him with a convenient myth. A dead hero father is the perfect backdrop for the image of a grieving single mother struck by tragedy. On December 3rd, 2008, Garnett Paul Spears was born, a tiny boy weighing just 6 pounds 2 ounces. From that moment on, Lacey's life completely migrated into the camera lens. The first months of Garnett's life should have been a time of tenderness, but for Lacey, they were a time for diagnoses. The boy wasn't even 9 weeks old when she began regularly bringing him to emergency rooms. She claimed he was constantly spitting up food, having terrible seizures, and passing out. Doctors ran tests, but the results came back normal time and again. But Lacey was persistent. She was the ideal mother, always there, always recording every movement of the child in a notebook, always speaking in a low, tremor-filled voice of anxiety. And the doctors began to give in. Under her pressure, Garnett had a gastrostomy tube, a feeding tube inserted directly into his stomach through the abdominal wall, installed. Lacey convinced the medics that her son couldn't eat on his own, that he was wasting away. This was her first major victory. Now she had an officially sick child. Now she had physical access to his internal organs, a tube through which she could introduce not just nutritional formulas, but anything at all. By age 2, Garnett's medical file was thicker than an elderly man's. Ear infections, digestive issues, mysterious sodium spikes. To avoid suspicion from overly inquisitive doctors in Alabama, Lacey began to drift. She moved to Florida, then to New York, to the Fellowship community in Chestnut Ridge, a sort of utopian settlement for artists and volunteers. In the Fellowship, Lacey was greeted like a saint, a fragile blonde raising a severely ill son alone. She seemed the definition of resilience. She often walked with Garnett along the wooded trails, covering 2 to 3 miles a day, pushing him in a stroller when he was too weak. But the moment she saw a passerby, she would immediately start adjusting the tube on her son's belly, drawing attention to his ailment. She created the blog Garnett's Journey on MySpace, later moving it to Twitter and Facebook. It was her personal series. Every one of Garnett's hospitalizations was accompanied by dozens of posts. "We're in the hospital again. My heart is broken, but my boy is a fighter." Today, Garnett's temperature rose to 102 degrees Fahrenheit. I won't close my eyes. She documented his every breath. She photographed his pale face against the white sheets, and the world responded with love. Thousands of comments. "You're the best mom in the world. Lacey, you're an inspiration to us all." She wasn't just blogging, she was literally feeding off this energy. But there was one problem. For the show to continue, Garnett could not get well. As soon as the boy started to improve, interest in the blog dropped, and that meant the illness had to be fed, and Lacey knew exactly how to do it. Salt, common table salt, found in every kitchen. In large doses, it turns into a lethal poison, causing brain swelling and a slow, agonizing death. Lacey Spears began turning her home and hospital rooms into a laboratory, where she slowly, milligram by milligram, was killing the only being who loved her unconditionally. Lacey settled into a small, cozy house. Neighbors often saw her on the porch. She would sit in a chair, hugging Garnett close, intensely typing away on her phone. To those around her, it was a picture of supreme devotion. They saw a woman who had left everything behind to dedicate herself to a special child. But if anyone could have peeked inside her head, or at least into her browser search history, the idol would have crumbled to dust. What was her motive? Money? No, Lacey wasn't receiving massive payouts. Power? Perhaps. But her primary drug was recognition. In psychology, this is known as Munchausen syndrome by proxy. It is a condition where a caregiver, most often a mother, intentionally causes symptoms of illness in a child to gain attention and sympathy for herself. For Lacey Spears, this syndrome mutated, fueled by the era of digital exhibitionism. She created a digital altar, where she daily sacrificed her own son's health. Garnett was her primary project, her ticket to a world where she was the heroine. The relationship between mother and son was hauntingly close. Garnett, who had turned 5 by 2014, was a charming child. Cheerful and affectionate, he loved playing with toy cars and feeding the neighbors' chickens. But he lived in a constant state of fear regarding his own weakness. Lacey had convinced him that he was terminally ill, that without her medicines and her care, he wouldn't survive. Imagine this contrast: a boy weighing only about 40 pounds, pale, with dark circles under his eyes, and his mother, blooming, active, always with a smile for the public. Cracks in her mask began to appear whenever Garnett managed to slip away from her care. Daycare workers and friends from the community noticed something strange. When Lacey wasn't around, Garnett transformed. He ate regular food with an appetite. He ran, he laughed. He had no seizures. He wasn't nauseous. He was an ordinary, healthy 5-year-old boy. But the moment Lacey appeared at the door, the moment she took his hand, the boy would instantly fade. He became lethargic, complaining of stomach pains. She would immediately grab her phone. "Another episode," she would whisper into the lens. "My poor boy is losing his strength." Lacey hated it when Garnett got better. For her, his recovery meant oblivion. If he was healthy, she was just an ordinary woman. If he was sick, she was a saint. Doctors in local clinics began asking questions. Why did the sodium levels in the child's blood jump so illogically? In natural illnesses, levels rise or fall gradually. In Garnett, they spiked to critical marks in minutes, as if someone were pouring concentrated brine into him. Lacey had a plan, cold, calculated. The Black Widow of motherhood did not act on impulse. She studied. Later, investigators would find her search queries: effects of high sodium in children, lethal dose of salt. Can a doctor determine salt poisoning in children? She knew what she was doing. She understood that every new portion of salt through the tube in Garnett's stomach was a step toward his grave. No, the thirst for likes was stronger than fear. She watched her follower count grow. She saw people weeping over her posts. And she decided it was time to bring this drama to its finale. In January 2014, Garnett fell ill once again. Lacey insisted on hospitalization at Westchester Medical Center. She didn't take him there to save him. She took him there to stage his final, loudest show. In her bag, among the children's clothes and toys, lay a bag of saline solution. Her weapon, her tool for creating the perfect content. She was ready. She was in anticipation, for the world was about to witness her greatest grief and reward her for it with her greatest portion of sympathy. Lacey Spears looks exhausted. She is in her favorite role, the hero mother who hasn't slept in days. But if you look closer, her movements are too calculated. She arranges things in room 516 as if she's setting a stage for a film production. A cartoon character blanket, Garnett's favorite teddy bear, and, most importantly, her iPhone charger. The show begins. Garnett was hospitalized with complaints of seizures, but as soon as he is under observation, his condition stabilizes. The doctors are puzzled. The boy is cheerful, he's playing, he weighs a steady 40 pounds, and his body temperature is a perfect 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. But this doesn't suit Lacey. She needs a crisis. She needs likes. January 19th, morning. Lacey writes on Twitter, "My sweet angel is very sick. The doctors don't know what to do. Please pray." At that very moment, Garnett feels fine, but Mommy says he needs to clear his tube. She takes him by the hand and leads him into the bathroom. It is the only place in the room that is not captured by the security camera. They stay there for 15 minutes. When they come out, Garnett is unrecognizable. He begins to vomit. He clutches his stomach, his tiny body racked with spasms. He cries, a quiet, choking sob. Lacey doesn't call the doctor right away. First, she takes out her phone. She takes a picture. By the time the nurses rush into the room, the sodium level in Garnett's blood has spiked to 182 millimoles per liter. This is unthinkable. This is a level where blood turns into poison. The doctors are in a panic. They don't understand how this is possible in a closed unit. A normal person would slip into a coma after this. But Garnett, his body, hardened by his mother's constant torture, fights back. January 21st, the climax. Garnett has improved slightly, and doctors have begun to hope for a miracle. But for Lacey, a miracle is a death sentence for her career. If he survives and recovers, she will be discharged. Back to the gray, back to obscurity. At 10:30 a.m., the hallway camera catches Lacey. She is walking to the bathroom, leading Garnett behind her. The boy walks slowly. He is weak. He trusts her. In Lacey's hand is a plastic cup. In it, the concentrated salt solution she prepared earlier. They go inside. The door closes. What happened during those minutes? We can only guess based on the cold logic of forensic experts. Lacey opens the valve of the gastrostomy tube on her son's stomach. She introduces the salty death directly into his gut. It causes an immediate, horrific chemical burn from the inside. The child begins to vomit uncontrollably. His brain starts to swell as the salt pulls every drop of water out of his cells. They leave the bathroom. Lacey leads him to the bed. She is calm. She is absolutely ice cold. She tucks him in, covers him with a blanket, and sits in a chair. 10 minutes pass, 20 minutes. Garnett is in agony. His body arches. He has gone blind from the pressure in his brain. Lacey Spears picks up her phone. She opens Facebook. Garnett is doing very, very poorly. I'm afraid I'm losing him, she types, while her son dies 3 feet away from her. She waits. She needs the damage to be irreversible. Only when Garnett stops breathing does she press the call button for the staff. A resuscitation team bursts into the room. Chaos ensues. Shouts, the sound of a defibrillator, doctors piling onto the small body. And what does Lacey do? She backs away to the wall and films it all. She is documenting her child's death in real time. The doctors record it. The sodium level in Garnett's blood is 200. This is a world record in cruelty. His brain has effectively cooked in a salt solution. He is moved to the ICU and placed on a ventilator. He is brain dead. Lacey sits in the hallway. Around her are friends from the community who rush to support the poor mother. She cries, but her tears are dry. She is constantly checking the number of shares on her latest post. My little hero is going to be with the angels, she writes. At that moment, one of the doctors, reviewing the security footage and the lab results, begins to realize that something is very wrong. Too many coincidences, too much salt, too much social media. Garnett Spears died on January 23, 2014. He didn't die of a disease. He died of his mother's thirst for recognition. In his stomach, during the autopsy, they will find an amount of sodium equivalent to several tablespoons of pure salt. Lacey Spears achieved her goal. The whole world knew of her grief. The whole world sympathized with her. She received thousands of messages. She was the center of attention. But she didn't know one thing. Detectives had already signed a search warrant for her home, and what they find there will forever erase the filters from her perfect photographs. In the days following the tragedy, Lacey played the part of the perfect widow of her own motherhood. She returned to the fellowship community, to her cozy little house in Chestnut Ridge. Neighbors brought her food, flowers, and offered support. She accepted it all with a demure nod, staring into the distance with those translucent eyes. But behind that facade, a feverish effort was underway to erase her tracks. While Garnett was still lying in the morgue, Lacey called her close friend from the community, Valerie. Her voice on the phone didn't shake. It was quiet, soft, businesslike. Valerie, honey, do me a favor, Lacey whispered. Go to my house. There's a feeding bag with a tube on the shelf, the one we used last. Please take it and just throw it away. I don't want to see anything that reminds me of his suffering. Valerie, moved by compassion, agreed. She didn't know yet that Lacey was asking her to destroy the smoking gun, the bag that still contained traces of concentrated saline. Lacey was confident. If the bag was gone, her guilt was impossible to prove. She thought she was smarter than all the detectives in Westchester. But the doctors were no fools. A committee was already at work in the hospital. Dr. Deborah Jeevens, a specialist in child abuse, was studying Garnett's medical history. She saw those sodium spikes, 182, 200. This doesn't happen from a mysterious illness. This happens when someone feeds a child the equivalent of 69 McDonald's salt packets in one sitting. The detectives began to ask questions, cautiously at first. Miss Spears, tell us again, what exactly did Garnett eat before he got sick? Lacey's answers were rehearsed. She described the symptoms. She tangled herself in the details. But she always returned to one thing. He was very sick from birth. I'm the only one who fought for him. The suspicion deepened when police obtained the security footage from the hospital, those 15 minutes in the bathroom. The video showed Lacey leading a living, albeit weak, boy into the bathroom, and coming out with a creature that could barely stand. She carried him in her arms back to the bed, and her face, it wasn't panicked. It showed a strange, haunting satisfaction. When detectives arrived at her home in Chestnut Ridge, Lacey met them in a black dress. She looked like a grieving Madonna. "Are you here to take his things?" she asked. "No, Lacey. We're here to understand why he died," the detective replied. They began the search, and the home of the ideal mother began to surrender its secrets. In the cupboard, behind jars of baby food, they found stockpiles of salt, huge bags of sea salt and table salt. But that wasn't the worst of it. In the trash can outside Valerie's house, police discovered the feeding bag. Lacey had been too late. Valerie, sensing something was wrong, hadn't thrown it far. She had simply hidden it. Forensic testing of the bag's contents revealed a sodium concentration comparable to the water in the Dead Sea. Meanwhile, Lacey continued her game on social media. She posted photos of an empty crib. She wrote about how much she missed the scent of his hair. She even organized a fundraiser for the funeral, even though the community had already paid for everything. She didn't hide. She didn't run. She was too confident in her mask. She believed her status as a grieving mother was a bulletproof vest that no investigation could pierce. But the circle was tightening. People in the community began to whisper. Friends who had once defended her now remembered the oddities, how she made Garnett wear sunglasses indoors, how she forbade him from playing with other children, claiming he had allergies to everything. The moment the mask shattered completely happened during the first official interrogation at the police station. Lacey sat in a room with white walls. In front of her, they laid out photos of Garnett's lab results. "Lacey, how did the salt get into his tube?" the detective asked. She was silent. Her eyes, always so expressive in her Instagram photos, turned cold, like two chips of ice. She wasn't crying anymore. She realized the show was over, but she didn't know that the fatal blow wouldn't come from the salt, but from her own phone. Technicians recovered her search history, and when the detective read out the list of queries, lethal dose of sodium for a 40-pound child. The room became so quiet you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. It wasn't the disappearance of a criminal into the woods. It was the disappearance of the human being inside that fragile blonde. Sitting before the police was a hollow shell that cared about only one thing. How do I look in this photograph? The investigation centered on that magic tube in Garnett's stomach. Detectives quickly realized that the gastrostomy tube, which was supposed to save the boy's life, had become a portal for Lacey to deliver death. Toxicologists confirmed the investigators' darkest fears: a sodium level in the blood, exceeding 180 millimoles per liter, simply does not occur in nature, even in the most severe cases of kidney disease. It was the equivalent of forcing a child to drink a glass of seawater with 10 times the salt concentration of the ocean. But Lacey was arrogant. She believed her digital army of followers would protect her. She made the classic mistake of every narcissist. She believed she was the smartest person in the room. She didn't know that her friend Valerie, the one she had tasked with throwing away the trash, was already giving a statement. Valerie handed over the feeding bag Lacey had tried to destroy. Inside, forensic experts found liquid residue, with a salt concentration equal to 69 McDonald's salt packets. This wasn't a dosage error. It was a concentrate for murder. Investigators began to dig deeper into Lacey's past, and the mask of the ideal mother shattered into 1,000 pieces. They discovered that Lacey had been lying about her son's health for years. She had taken him to 20 different doctors across 5 different states, traveling hundreds of miles as soon as physicians began to suspect that Garnett was actually healthy. She was doctor shopping, searching for those who were gullible enough to prescribe another procedure or surgery. The most crushing blow to her defense, however, came from her own MacBook. A team of cyber investigators recovered her Google search history, which she had fruitlessly tried to delete. While Garnett lay in his hospital bed, Lacey, sitting just 2 feet away, was searching, "How does high sodium affect a child's brain?" and "lethal dose of salt." She was studying the symptoms of an overdose so she could mimic them for the doctors. She was the screenwriter, the director, and the executioner, all in one. Detectives also found photographs that Lacey hadn't yet published. In them, Garnett didn't look like a brave warrior. He looked like a tormented, terrified victim. There were shots of him crying in pain while she simply adjusted the lighting and the filter. When Lacey was officially brought in for questioning as a suspect, she was eerily calm. No panic, no cries of injustice. She sat in the interrogation room with her back straight, her voice like ice. When presented with the evidence of the poisoning through the tube, she merely shrugged. "I don't know how that got in there," she repeated in a monotone voice. "I only loved him." Her alibi collapsed instantly. She claimed Garnett had somehow found the salt himself, but a 5-year-old in his condition couldn't physically consume that much salt without an immediate gag reflex. The only way to bypass the body's natural defenses was to pump it directly into the stomach through the port. And only Lacey had access to that port during those fatal 15 minutes in the hospital bathroom. The investigators also discovered that Lacey had been salt-feeding Garnett at home for years. Neighbors in the fellowship community began to remember how the boy often complained of an unbearable thirst. He would beg for water as if he were walking through a desert at 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Now they understood why. His mother was intentionally dehydrating him, turning his life into an endless torture of thirst. The final nail in the coffin was the surveillance footage. Lacey entering the bathroom with a plastic cup and leaving with it empty. Her magic of sympathy was built on the simple, filthy mechanics of poisoning. She was trapped by her own vanity, caught in a world where her digital history became her most terrifying accuser. The prosecution left her no room to breathe. On the massive screens in the courtroom, they played those same 15 minutes from the hospital hallway. We watched as she led Garnett into the bathroom, and as she emerged, carrying his limp body. Doctors took the stand, one after another. They spoke of a toxic environment, of unexplained sodium spikes, and of the fact that the salt level in the body of a 5-year-old boy, weighing only 40 pounds, was equivalent to a lethal injection. Computer experts read out her search queries, and every word, "death by sodium," "suffering during overdose," sounded like a hammer blow against her defense. Lacey didn't shed a single tear. She listened to descriptions of how her son died in agony, how his brain literally burst from the pressure, and not a single muscle on her face twitched. She refused to testify in her own defense. She simply remained silent, huddled in her cardigan, as if trying to hide from the reality she herself had manufactured. Her lawyers tried to shift the blame onto the doctors, claiming medical malpractice, but against the video footage and the browser history, their arguments crumbled to dust. It took the jury less than 3 days to return a verdict, guilty of second-degree murder. In April 2015, Judge Robert Neary, while pronouncing the sentence, did not hide his disgust. He looked at Lacey and saw not a victim of circumstance, but a cold, calculating manipulator. "Your crime is unfathomable in its cruelty. You turned your own child's life into an endless series of tortures, and all to feed your own pathetic ego." Lacey Spears was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. In the American system, this means she will spend at least 2 decades behind bars before she has even a ghost of a chance at parole. As she was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, she turned to look at the cameras one last time. No, this time, No one gave her a like. The world finally saw her for what she was, a woman who traded her son's life for the illusion of sympathy in a live broadcast. The residents of the fellowship community still try not to look toward that cozy little house where a golden-haired boy once laughed. They live with the heavy burden of realization. They were the background extras in a play of death. Their sympathy, their prayers, and their likes were the very fuel that kept the fire burning in that hellish furnace. Garnett's story isn't just a criminal episode from New York. It is a mirror that we are all afraid to look into. We live in an era where suffering has been turned into content and sincerity into a marketing tool. We've grown used to trusting the image, forgetting that behind the warmest filter, an icy abyss can hide. The next time you see another story of heroic struggle in your feed, look a little closer. Perhaps behind the scenes, there is more than just the whisper of a prayer. Perhaps there is the faint, barely audible sound of salt being poured. After all, the most dangerous monsters don't hide in the woods. They sit in warm living rooms, smiling into the lens and waiting for you to hit the share button. Protect your children. And remember, true love doesn't demand a standing ovation. It is quiet, it is hidden, and it never seeks validation in a live broadcast. Like this story if you found it interesting, and subscribe to the channel. I look forward to reading your thoughts on this case in the comments below.